Okay, we're back again. Getting ready to set the crank, pull the crank, however you want to term it. What we want to do is get the crank centered in the crankcase. So in the last video, when I checked the bearings to make sure they were square, remember it was 33.17 millimeters between the inner races. So kind of keep that in mind, 33.17. So we'll go ahead and put that on our calculator. 33.17. And then what you want to do is measure the distance between, get the right setting here, we're starting on 0, between the machined land surfaces. These are bearing land surfaces. So measure the distance between them land surfaces on your crank, and that's coming up to roughly about 3281. Yeah, 3281. So you subtract 3281 from the 3317, 32.81. That's 0.36 millimeters. So how you set the crank is you figure up how many thousandths of an inch you need on each side of the crank to get it centered. So I got to convert 0.36 millimeters over to thousandths. So what I'll do, this actually displays millimeters, fractions, and thousandths of an inch. But I'll open that up to where it's about 0.36, which is going to be really hard to do. That's close enough, 0.37. I actually just moved it, so it's 0.36, so I'm going to convert this over to thousandths. That's 14 thousandths of an inch. 0.014. That's 14 thousandths, or 14 10,000ths, however you want to say it. But it's 14 thousandths. So you want to find the center. So half of 14 would be 7. So you want to put a 7 thousandths feeler gauge on the PTO side, on the front and the back side of the crankshaft, where the crank meets down onto this center part of this race when you pull it together. That'll offset that crank 7 thousandths to the flywheel side, and when you're done you should also have 7 thousandths on the flywheel side between the bearing land and the crank machine surface. So when you pull the cases together, your crank is perfectly centered. So just remember, find the distance between your bearing lands, find the distance, the thickness of the crank to the machine surfaces for the bearing lands. Subtract that from this distance in your crank, or excuse me, in your crankcase. Divide it by 2, and that's how much you have to offset one side to get it centered. And like I said, we've done the math, and it was 36.36 millimeters, which come up to it was 14 thousandths is what it was total. I just bumped it there just a tad there. It went back to 14 thousandths, and half of 14 thousandths would be 7. So that's how I come up with the 7 thousandths feeler gauge on one side, pushes the crank 7 thousandths toward the other side, which will shrink that 14 thousandths by half, centering your crank. Hope you enjoyed. See you in the next video.